Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So, my name is Rachel, and this is the Global Compassion Coalition. And if you don't already know who we are a global non-profit organisation that acts as a hub of resources and an associated coalition of individuals and organisations who are invested in using the power of compassion to relieve suffering around the world, and including the systemic causes of suffering. And if you'd like to learn more, please look at our website. And today we have a wonderful talk from a speaker who I'll introduce in just a moment, but I just want to let you know that if you have any questions at all during this talk, please just pop them in the chat, and also feel free to say hi now. Let us know where you are tuning in from. And yeah, we'll have a little Q&A at the end. So yeah, I think we're ready to bring our speaker on now. So hello, David.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks very much for having me. I'm so looking forward to chatting.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for saying yes to us.
Oh, my pleasure.
So David Hamilton is a former R&D research and development scientist and an author of 12 books, including The Joy of Actually Giving an F, which is was released this July. So do check that out. And also the book called The 5 Side Effects of Kindness. He is a magazine columnist, a regular podcast guest, and a regular speaker in both the public and corporate sector, having delivered talks for Google, 3M, the NHS, the Bank of England, and many others. And he's also the honorary scientific advisor of the charity 52 Lives, which helps people in need through public acts of kindness. So David is going to be talking to us today about the benefits of kindness. So in case you needed a little boost in motivation to bring kindness into your life, into your community, into the world at large, then hopefully this will provide ample inspiration for you. No pressure, David. And and with that said, thank you once again for being here, David. And the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, hi, everyone. I hope you get a lot out of what I'm here to talk about this evening. And just to build on, thanks so much, Rachel, for that really lovely introduction. It was working as an R&D scientist, incidentally, that got me interested in the whole field of kindness. You see, I worked mostly in cardiovascular medicine and a wee bit in cancer, but predominantly cardiovascular medicine. And I became really fascinated by the placebo effect. And I wanted to understand, how is it that our mind and emotions, our beliefs and how we feel in our imagination, how is that? How is it that has a seeming physical effect on our health? And so I began to study it and trying to understand that. And after a few years of researching that, it turns out that one of the most really powerful and profound sets of effects from any state, psychological, emotional state, is the effects that follow an experience of kindness. And when I say an experience of kindness or compassion, even, it's whether you're the giver, the receiver, or even the witness to it. So you can literally be witnessing a display of kindness or compassion, whether live or even on a video, and it has some really profound effects on the brain and in the body. So what I'm going to do over this short talk is compact really everything I've ever learned about this subject that would be useful to know and helpful on a practical level as well, about kindness and how it really affects and enriches really our lives. And I thought I'd start with the impact of kindness on our mental health. Now, most people have known through experience that when you're kind, when you help someone, it feels nice. And probably also from experience, many of us have probably learned that you feel a wee bit better. You get a wee lift when you help someone. Now, researchers have been studying this phenomena for a long time. And what they now understand is, in the long term, kindness actually boosts happiness, and it's also protective to an extent against anxiety and depression. And one of the most important things that happen is it's not just that kindness sort of feels nice, there's actually physical effects in the brain. But before I get into it, let me just share one of a typical type of experiment that researchers do. So scientists gave a large group of people a small sum of money at the beginning of the day. And they said to half of them, take that money and spend it on yourself, treat yourself. And they said to the other half of the people, take that money and do something good with it. Do something for the benefit of other people with that money. And then they were to meet back at the end of the day. They had a series of tests done, including psychology tests and stuff. And it turned out that those who'd done something good with the money, who'd essentially spent the money on other people, were much happier than those who'd spent the money on themselves. And that's a sort of phenomena that repeats itself time and time again. And inside the brain, what actually happens is kindness produces, it's like some researchers call it a smoothie, a feel-good smoothie, because what we actually get is things like dopamine and serotonin, which many people have heard of, oxytocin as well, depending on the type of kindness, and even the brain's natural opioids, the brain's natural versions of kind of morphine and heroin. We have natural versions that are really, really, that they help us to have a bit of a high. It's one of the reasons actually why the good feelings you get, researchers used to call it helper's high, because it's a sort of warm, kind of fuzzy feeling. But it gets much better than this, because it's not just that kindness feels good and produces a little change in the chemistry of the brain. Kindness actually brings about physical effects in the structure of the brain. And it's a bit like this. I'm guessing that many of us watching this video or listening to this have had some sort of experience of mindfulness. Now, if you've never done mindfulness, think of this as mindfulness 101, right? So let's suppose you were to breathe, which I hope is something you do. but let's suppose you were to breathe. And if I was to take a scan of your brain while you breathe, then there will be activity all over the brain, and lots of different, dotted in lots of different seemingly random patterns. But now, if I then asked you to bring your attention to your breath, to bring your attention to what breathing is like for you, and now what will happen is you'll start to notice what it sounds like. You might notice the feeling in your nose, maybe in your tummy or your chest, or even on your bottom if you're sitting on a seat. And as you're bringing your attention to what breathing is like, you're mindful that you're breathing. It's the simplest form of mindfulness, to bring your attention to your breath. Now, if I was to take a scan of your brain, you'll find most of the activity now just above the eyes in this frontal part. It's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and that's for the test at the end that I'll be giving out. Nah, I'm only kidding. There's no test, but it's just in case you're interested in some of these kind of technical terms. But basically, this is the noticing part of the brain, and what that means is it's the part of the brain that's most active when you're giving something your full attention. And now, what's happening now, if you're giving your full attention to what breathing is like, you're essentially giving this part of the brain a workout. It's like you take it to the gym. And similarly, if you go to the gym and you work out a muscle, you'll notice that three things happen. The muscle becomes firmer, it becomes larger, and it becomes more powerful. And it means that everything you use that muscle for then, because it's more powerful, becomes easier. So when you do something like mindfulness and you bring your attention to what breathing is like, and you impact this part of the brain, you give this part of the brain a workout, then it also becomes firmer, larger, more powerful. Now, obviously, neuroscientists don't call it muscle growth, because they have their own names and they like to sound really clever. So what we do, we give it a separate name. It's called neuroplasticity. But if you've ever heard the term neuroplasticity, it more or less refers to the brain's own version of muscle growth. But now, so when you're bringing your attention to what breathing is like and you're working at this part of the brain, it becomes firmer, larger, more powerful. It means that everything this part of the brain is used for becomes easier. So happens that this part of the brain plays a central role in concentration, in the ability to manage your state, your mental and emotional state, the ability to override knee-jerk emotional reactions to things, and even some short-term memory. So as you practice, say, mindfulness, because this part of the brain becomes more powerful, all of these abilities, the ability to manage your state, etc., become easier for us. But here's where I'm going with this. What if instead of doing mindfulness, you do what I call kindfulness? And kindfulness is any type of mindfulness-based practice where at least some of your focus is in the direction of compassion or kindness. At least some of the focus. It might be a little bit, or it might be all of it. It could be as simple as doing mindfulness and then spending a moment or two just wishing people that you know some good, something happiness in their life. Or it could be you thinking of someone you care about and you're just thinking of all the reasons why you love the person or why you care about the person. You could be even recalling experiences of kindness or compassion that you've had in your life. But whatever you're doing now, because you're now putting some of your attention in the direction of compassion and kindness, you're giving it your attention, you're working at the same frontal part of the brain, but now there's a slight bias to the left-hand side. Now, crucially, this part of the brain now also becomes literally more powerful. And it means, and this part of the brain plays a central role in happiness and joy and positive mood states. And what that means is as this part of the brain, through simply thinking, putting your attention. Now, I know this sounds a bit kind of woo-woo to some. You're not necessarily being kind. You get the same effect through being kind and compassionate. But I'm talking here, you're thinking. You're actually just directing your mental attention onto thinking compassionately and kindly. And you're actually changing the physical structure of the brain. It becomes firmer, larger, and more powerful. And it means that everything that part of the brain is used for becomes more accessible to you. Because this part of the brain plays a central role in happiness, joy, and positive mood states, it means that as we put our attention in the direction of compassion and kindness, it means that happiness and joy and positive mood states become more accessible to us. Now, obviously, it doesn't guarantee that if you be compassionate or kind, you'll always be happy, because we know that's not the case, because life happens and life can challenge us in some really, really difficult ways at times. But what it does mean is, against the backdrop of life as it happens, these positive mood states do become more accessible to us. But it gets even more really cool than this even, because if I was to ask you a question, what do you think is the opposite of stress? And what would you say? Just think for a second. If you were to give an answer, what would you say is the opposite of stress? Now, I would suspect right now that many of us are thinking, well, the opposite of stress, probably peace or calm or something along those lines. And that's the answers that I first gave when I was first looking into this subject. But in actual fact, peace or calm or even tranquility, they're not the opposite of stress. They more represent the absence of stress, the states we would feel in the absence of stress. Neurologically and physiologically, the opposite of stress is kindness. But let me rephrase that, because I know some of us might be thinking, well, stress is a feeling state or an experience, and kindness is a thing that you do. So how can they be opposite? So let me reword this. The opposite of the experience of stress and what that experience is like is the experience of kindness. And what that experience is like, it's the experience of kindness is opposite from the experience of stress. And this is where it gets really cool, because just like an experience of stress produces what we know of as stress hormones, like adrenaline, cortisol, an experience of kindness produces what I refer to as kindness hormones. And I really just call them kindness hormones to draw this parallel that just like stress hormones, they're produced due to what an experience is like. But one of the most remarkable things about stress hormones versus kindness hormones is they do opposite things. And so if stress hormones sort of go that way, then kindness hormones sort of go that way. And nowhere is that more evident than in the brain. When you have an experience of stress, our little stress hormones and other little things target a region deep into the brain towards the back that plays a central role in stress, worry, fear, anxiety, and dial up the intensity of it And this is why sometimes when you're feeling stressed, it's difficult to just snap out of it, isn't it? To just think a few positive thoughts, because your stress hormones are now winding up the activity of that center of the brain. But it turns out that kindness hormones bind to, they literally park on this region of the brain that plays that central role in stress, worry, fear, anxiety, and they dial down the volume of it. It's like you've gone into a room and the volume of say, music that you don't like is too loud, and you think, oh my goodness, it's too loud. And imagine you had a volume control, you could dial the volume down. Well, experiences of kindness actually neurologically dial down the volume of the experiences of stress. So right in the brain, kindness is an experience of kindness is opposite from an experience of stress. But it's not just psychologically, it's an actual physical effect inside the brain. But you know what I love about all this is our kindness hormones don't just float around and do their business in the brain. They actually have huge effects inside the body. And you know, right at the very start, Rachel gave me a lovely introduction and mentioned that I formerly worked in research and development, and I worked in cardiovascular medicine. And one of my very first projects was hypertension, was to try to reduce blood pressure. Now, you can approach, as a scientist, you can approach that seeming challenge in a number of different ways, you know. And one of the ways you can do it is to expand a blood vessel. And amazingly, our kindness hormones do that. Like kindness hormones. So let's say you be kind, and it could be you could be literally, you don't have to do big things for it to register as kindness. I'm talking here about those little words of encouragement or support, those little displays of compassion, those times when you sit with someone and just so that they know that they're not alone, or they know that they can rest upon you and you're here for them. It's these little things that we do a lot of the time that matter a heck of a lot. So you have one of these experiences of compassion or kindness, and you produce kindness hormones, not just in the brain, but you're producing them in the heart and in other parts of the body. And one of the things they do is they park on the lining of your blood vessels. And they really do park. You know, there's sometimes you get these really big parking bays. In the UK, where I'm based, we have service stations on the big motorways, or the freeways, as you would call them in some other countries. And they have different shapes and sizes of parking bays that are receptive to vehicles of different shapes and sizes. So you have really big ones for buses and other big ones for caravans. And then you have middle-sized ones for SUVs. You have normal-sized ones for normal cars. And you have wee dinky ones for motorcycles. But you have different shapes and sizes of parking bays that are a fit for vehicles of different shapes and sizes. So inside the body, we have something similar. Although scientists don't call them vehicles and parking bays. Again, we like to sound really clever. So pharmacologists call them hormones and receptors. So if ever you hear that term, that phrase, hormones and receptors, it's like the body's version of vehicles and parking bays. And it turns out that on the lining of our blood vessels, we have millions upon millions upon millions of parking bays, i.e. receptors, that are an exact snuggly fit for our kindness hormones. And amazingly, our kindness hormones, they park, or to use a technical term, they bind to the receptor. That really just means they park in their parking bay. And something really magical happens. There's now a release. There's a wee chemical reaction, a wee thing called nitric oxide gets fired out, right? If you're interested in the more technical details of it. Not nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas, but nitric oxide. And what happens now is the tension on the walls of the blood vessels releases a little bit. And so the blood vessel wall softens and it goes like that. And it expands. It probably makes that sound if you were listening to it as well. But your blood vessel wall releases some of the tension, it softens and it expands. Now, your heart doesn't have to work quite as hard to push the blood through. So your heart eases off some of its pressure. What you and I get out of that is a reduction in blood pressure. So now we know. So because of that, compassion and kindness, which are vehicles that are basically states that that produce kindness hormones, compassion and kindness are cardioprotective. And what that means is they protect your cardiovascular system. In fact, remember that study I told you right at the start? The reason why I shared that study right at the start, when I said that scientists got a large number of volunteers, and they gave them a small sum of money at the start of the day. They asked half to spend it on themselves, half to do something good with it. Some of the same researchers a few years later did a similar type of study, but this time they did it over 3 weeks. And instead of having just random members of the public in the study, what they did is they recruited hypertension patients. So patients who'd been clinically diagnosed with hypertension, i.e. high blood pressure. And similarly to the previous study, this time they did it over 3 weeks rather than 1 day. They gave everyone a sum of money each week for the 3 weeks. Half of them, they said, again, like the previous study, go out and spend that money on yourself. Treat yourself. Do something nice for yourself with that money. And the other half, like the previous study, they said, do something good with that money. Do something that benefits other people. Spend it on other people, that money. And amazingly, at the end of the 3 weeks, these hypertensive patients, those who'd done something good with the money, who'd essentially spent it on others or for the well-being of other people, had much lower blood pressure, both systolic and diastolic, than those who'd spent the money on themselves. And here's the really amazing thing. The magnitude of the effect size, was comparable with the effect of diet, exercise, or taking antihypertensive medication. Isn't that absolutely remarkable? And the intervention was kindness. Isn't that amazing? And what I love about this is scientists are now beginning to understand what actually goes on in the body. Part of it is it feels nice and it relaxes your nervous system, which there also has an impact on blood pressure. But another part of it is the experience of kindness produces your kindness hormones that park on the lining of blood vessels, cause a release in tension. The blood vessel widens, the heart doesn't have to push as hard, and it eases off its pressure. We get a reduction in blood pressure. And this also helps to explain one of my all-time favorite statistics in science. Now, I love animals. I have a lot of compassion for animals. And that really began because we lost a dog called Oscar about 10 years ago. Now, Oscar was only 2 years old. He was a yellow Labrador, and he had bone cancer. It's very young for a dog to have bone cancer, and he passed away. And we did everything you could possibly imagine. Those of you who have animals in your family, you'll understand exactly where I'm going with this. You do everything you possibly can to save their life. And because we literally spent so many hours caring for them and doing everything for them, I bonded in a way that I'd never bonded with an animal before. And from that time onwards, I've just had this amazing love and fondness for all animals. That, not that I didn't have before, but it just took it to another level of realization for me. So I think so the reason I'm putting this into context is I want to show you why this is my favorite statistic in science. So get this: the chances of a second heart attack in someone who's had one already, so someone who's had a heart attack, the chances of another one within a 12-month period, if they have a dog, is 400% less. Isn't that amazing? 400% less. Now, you'd be forgiven for assuming that the reason for that statistic is due to the exercise you get from taking a dog for a walk. And of course, absolutely, taking a dog for a walk gives you a lot of exercise, and it definitely contributes to that effect. But it's not the only contributor, and it might not be the biggest contributor to the effect, because even larger, more modern studies look at with thousands of people, look at people who've had in their family dogs, cats, rabbits, or any other animal that we tend to bond with in our families, and have found a substantial protective effect against heart attack and stroke. And the effect is more or less the same with cats and dogs. So don't tend to take a cat for a walk. So it can't really just be the exercise that's producing that effect. So Front Page, a few years ago, in one of the highest ranked scientific journals in the world, one of the most respected scientific journals in the world, Front Page was a picture of a lovely dog. And the study was called the headline was A Lasting Bond. And researchers asked volunteers to interact lovingly, warmly, playfully, and affectionately with their dog for 30 minutes while having levels of kindness hormones measured. And amazingly, levels of kindness hormones increased at a rate of about 10% per minute over that time. Now, not 10% in total. Now, when I formerly worked in cardiovascular medicine, if someone had said to me, oh, interacting lovingly and affectionately with a dog or any animal for half an hour will increase levels of a cardioprotective hormone by 10%, I'd have taken that as a win. But it wasn't 10% in total. It was 10% per minute. Over that was the rate over that 30 minutes. Isn't that absolutely extraordinary? So now you can begin to understand that given the levels that get produced through interacting lovingly, warmly, affectionately with the animal, produces a 300% increase in levels of kindness hormones. And given how cardioprotective our kindness hormones are, you can begin to now understand why that is such a large factor, protective factor in that statistic, that the chances of a second heart attack within 1 year in people who've had one already, if they have a dog, is 400% less. And you know, the effect is also true with humans. It's just a lot of work has been done with animals for a number of different reasons. In fact, you know, scientists once asked 59 women to keep a diary over a month of all the hugs they experienced, and that was a metric. It was a sort of metric that was associated, that was meant to mean it's related to how much affection you might have in your life. And what they found is those women who had the most hugs in that 4-week period had by far the highest levels of kindness hormones and, by extension, the lowest blood pressure. So we have and there's a lot of other different statistical effects. In fact, you know, one of my favorite titles for a piece of scientific research is marital conflict relations and coronary artery calcification. Right, you can probably work out what that's about. So marital conflict relations and coronary artery calcification. And scientists once asked volunteers, once asked 150 married couples, they put them in a room, one couple at a time, and they put a video camera on them, and they asked them to discuss challenging topics from their marriage, you know, things like household finances, education of the children, stuff that they might not always agree on. And the researchers wanted to observe how they behaved. And they knew that was a proxy for that slice of time was a proxy for probably normal behavior. And what they found is, looking at all the couples, they started to grade different behavior. So a display of empathy or compassion or kindness would get like a plus score, and displays of hostility and aggression, anger, outbursts would get a negative score. And, you know, we all get angry from time to time, but it's what some things neutralized each other. They added up the pluses and the minus, and they got a whole scale. And at one end of the scale, they got those who were defined as hostile and aggressive. That seemed to be the main display, was hostility and aggression. And at the other end, you had those who were defined morely in terms of compassion and kindness. They were more compassionate, kind, what is often referred to as softer people, more heart-centered people. Now, in one of the most astonishing symmetries I've ever come across in science, and you know, a symmetry, something symmetrical, it's the same out and in kind of thing. And those who were most hostile and aggressive, whom you might say were harder in their emotional exterior, had higher levels of hardening of the arteries, or the precursor to it. And those who were softer, more compassionate and kind, had much softer arteries. And when they took out of the equation the effect of diet, lifestyle, exercise, the only difference came down to how they treated each other, whether it was hostility and aggression, or whether it's compassion and kindness. And it seems to be how we're being towards each other has a tremendous impact on the heart. Now don't start worrying, thinking, oh my God, I was angry one time, I was a wee bit angry and aggressive there. It doesn't quite work like that. It takes a long time to build up any kind of effects, but the more potent effect seems to be of compassion and kindness anyway. So, and the reason for that, I think of these well-being effects we get from kindness as nature's reward. And that's because we actually have kind genes. We're as a species, we're supposed to be kind. We're supposed to be kind. Our genes related to the tendency to be kind are some of the oldest in the human genome, at least 100 million years old, but the roots go back almost 700 million years. So we're supposed to be kind. It's when we're not, when we move into unkind behaviors and aggression and hostility, that's when we introduce ourselves to stress and some of the negative consequences of that. But, kindness impacts not just the heart, it impacts us in a whole range of different ways. Researchers recently took blood samples of people, half of whom they'd asked to go out and do acts of kindness over a period of time. And they were compared to a sample, a control group, who were just being their normal selves without the additional acts of, say, compassion and kindness. And they had their blood samples taken. And the researchers looked at the activity of genes in immune cells in the blood. And what they found is those who were being compassionate and kind, there was a beneficial change in the activity of the genes. So I'm talking a genetic effect in immune cells in the blood of being compassionate and kind. And the change in activity of these genes was consistent with a reduction in inflammation in the blood. Isn't that extraordinary? So I'm talking here an anti-inflammatory effect inside the bloodstream, and in that case around immune cells. It's simply through being kind. Another immunology study a couple of years ago, researchers asked volunteers to watch a video that was about an hour long, demonstrating compassion and kindness. Now, the video happened to be this was done back in the late 80s, and it was a video of Mother Teresa. And the effect for a while has been known affectionately as the Mother Teresa effect, simply because they used that video at that time. And they watched this video, and before and after, and for another couple of time periods afterwards, they took levels of an immune system antibody in our saliva that lines our mucous membranes. It's the first part of the immune system that responds if, for example, you eat something that's contaminated. See, you drop a piece of food, and the 5-second rule. I don't know. In Scotland, we have this 5-second rule. If you drop something on the floor, no one's looking. If it's not been on the floor longer than 5 seconds, then it's fair game. Where I grew up, it was like the 5-minute rule. But anyway, but the point is, if it has any contamination on it, this immune system antibody, it's called secretory immunoglobulin A. Again, that's for the test at the end, or SIGA for short. But anyway, what they found, and it's a really good proxy for overall immune function, and what they found is simply by watching this video, right? By watching that, this was over 100 people as well. Simply by watching this video, levels of SIGA, this immune system antibody, a proxy for overall immune function, increased by about 50%. 50%. Isn't that amazing? By not going out and being kind, by watching a video displaying compassion and kindness. And what was equally impressive is the level stayed elevated for some time afterwards. And that's because the volunteers kept reflecting back, saying, "Oh, remember that scene, that part where Mother Teresa sat beside that elderly homeless gentleman and didn't even say a word. She just held his hand and laid his head against her shoulder, showing compassion, just so that he would not feel alone in the world at that time." And as they reminisced on that scene, the SIGA levels began to spike again. Isn't that absolutely extraordinary? Now, the reason for that effect is when we have an experience of compassion and kindness, because of what happens inside the body, it takes some of the stress pressure off the immune system, and that then allows the immune system to work more optimally. So what we tend to get when we have an experience of compassion or kindness is a little boost to the immune system, separately from even the genetic effect that I shared a moment ago. But one of the really cool effects of kindness is actually on the aging process. Now, remember earlier I asked the question, what is the opposite of stress? And I shared that neurologically and physiologically, the opposite of stress is kindness, or the opposite of the experience of stress is the experience of kindness. Well, what is the best known, one of the best known at least, accelerators of aging? It's stress, isn't it? So what do you suppose then is an anti-aging, brings about an anti-aging effect? Absolutely, kindness. Now, it's okay saying that, but what I love now is we now have scientific evidence for that. In fact, researchers just a couple of years ago took skin cells and they put the skin cells under stress in the lab, and that stress was meant to simulate the physiological environment around our cells when we're under chronic mental and emotional stress or lifestyle stress. And what they found in the skin cells was elevated levels of little things called free radicals. Now, free radicals are little substances that play a large role in the aging process. They cause degradation inside our arteries. They're implicated in memory loss. They're implicated in dementia. They play a big role in basically wasting of the muscles as we age. They play a massive role, including aging of our skin. And it's why actually now modern beauty products often contain antioxidants, because an antioxidant is a wee sponge. It's like a wee sponge that soaks up all the free radicals, which is why we have them in beauty products. Because if what's contributing to aging of the skin is free radicals, if you can have a natural substance in the beauty product that soaks up the wee free radicals, then it reduces the rate of aging of the skin. So that's the logic behind it. It's also why we're encouraged to eat. One of the reasons why we're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables and leafy green vegetables and the green teas and all that, because they're laced with copious amounts of natural antioxidants, which are the wee sponges that soak up all the free radicals, which is why these things are protective to the heart and protective to the brain, because they're soaking up all the free radicals. Anyway, where I'm going with this experiment is scientists put these skin cells under pressure, under stress pressure in the lab, elevated levels of free radicals. Then they did the experiment again. But this time, they added a few squirts of our kindness hormones. So in the presence of physiological levels of our kindness hormones. And amazingly, there was a massive drop in levels of free radicals. Isn't that amazing? A massive drop in levels of free radicals in the skin cells. In other words, our kindness hormone plays a role as an antioxidant. It also plays an anti-inflammatory role as well. But in this particular study, it was playing a role as an antioxidant in our skin. And I can testify to this. You know, I've been practicing kindness now for 107 years. Now, I'm only, obviously, I'm only kidding. I'm clearly only about 95 years old. I like to exaggerate a little bit. But joking aside, we're now beginning to understand that compassion and kindness really do have an anti-aging effect. And it's not just the fact that it feels relaxing and we're not under stress. There's actually a physiological, a biological, a genetic impact of experiences of compassion and kindness that brings about an anti-aging effect in a number of different ways. In fact, I mentioned genetics there. Before I move on to the next kind of part of the talk, researchers asked volunteers to do mindfulness, or what I call kindfulness. So as I say earlier, when part of your meditation practice is focused in the direction of compassion and kindness. And they measured the length of a little end cap on our DNA that are called telomeres. You know, those little plastic end caps on our shoelaces that ensure that we can poke the shoelace through the wee hole. Now, those plastic end caps on our shoelaces are called aglets. And over time, as we know, aglets wear away. And once they're worn away, the shoelace is useless, because you have to go like that and make a wee point, don't you? Make a wee point and you poke the little point of the thread through the wee hole. But for all intents and purposes, the shoelace is useless. Something very similar happens in our cells. And our DNA has an aglet, although researchers don't call it aglets. Again, they like to sound really clever, so we call them telomeres. But it's a kind of similar sort of thing. And what they do is they protect the DNA. But they also wear down over time through wear and tear, through stresses and strains of life. In fact, the length of telomeres is a very accurate predictor of a person's biological age. And the rate of loss of a telomere over a given period of time is a very accurate way of predicting biological age and the rate of aging of the body. When I say biological age, you've got two ages. You've got your chronological age, which is the number of years you've been on this planet, And you have your biological age, which is essentially the effective age of your body. And people with a healthy lifestyle tend to have a biological age which is less than their chronological age as a consequence. Anyway, researchers were looking at telomeres. They compared ordinary people, a control group not doing any meditation, versus mindfulness versus kindfulness. So people contemplating compassion and kindness. And what they found is people doing mindfulness, there was a slight slowing down of the loss of telomere in an 8-week period of daily practice. But those who did the kindfulness, who aligned their thinking in a direction of compassion and kindness, there was no measurable loss of telomere at all during that 8 weeks, at all. Isn't that amazing? Now, again, I'm not suggesting that if you think compassionately and kindness and you treat people with compassion and kindness, you'll never age. Obviously not. Obviously, that's not the case. But the point is, under these experimental conditions, researchers were identifying a genetic effect of aligning our mind and emotions, our attitudes, our behaviors in the direction of compassion and kindness, and showing an anti-aging effect right down to the genetic level. Isn't that absolutely extraordinary? So anyway, I've talked a lot so far about kindness to others and compassion to others, but what about ourselves? I think this is the part that many of us forget about, that we also need to be kind and show compassion to ourselves. I think it's easy to forget that bit, but it's so crucially important. And it doesn't have to be lavish spending. You know, I live in a wee town in central Scotland called Dunblane, not too far from Edinburgh. And there's a lovely spa in Edinburgh. And when I was writing my most recent book, and I wrote a big chapter on how to be kind to yourself and why it's important to be so. And I asked a number of friends, what's your idea of self-kindness, or self-care, as many people refer to it as self-kindness, self-care, more or less the same thing. And most people said, oh, a day at the Sheraton at the spa. You know, I'm not a salesperson, by the way. I don't work for the Sheraton, big hotel chain. I don't work for them. I'm just saying it's a lovely spa, and that's what the answer that all of my friends gave. And it got me thinking that many people have this idea that self-care means lavish spa days or lavish, luxurious spending spree on ourselves. And yeah, absolutely, that is a way to practice self-care. But it's not the only way. There's a million ways to be kind to yourself. You know, one of the things that I do is I often find myself under time pressure. Like I've got so many things to do, like writing deadlines and stuff, and a whole host of different things. And now what I do, I realize that no matter how busy I am, if someone I know needs my help or needs time, needs my attention, I always manage to find time for them. I'll find a slot, I'll put a slot in my diary, I'll always find the time. So what I now do is I put a slot in my diary that says meeting with self. And what I'm doing there is I'm elevating self-kindness, self-care. I'm elevating protecting my own mental health. I'm elevating that to the same level as being kind to other people. In other words, I'm just raising the priority of it, because I think we sometimes forget. Because I think there's a scale, right? At one end of the scale, it feels like our cup is overflowing. Our energy levels are high psychologically, physically, and we have lots of time and energy and resources with which to assist other people. But then there's times in our lives, and I think we can all relate to this, there's times in our lives when it feels like your battery's flat or your cup is running dry. And you're exhausted mentally and even physically, yet we still try to help other people. But this is the point at this end of the scale where we need to turn the kindness towards ourselves and practice self-kindness, so that not instead of helping other people, but so that we can charge our batteries a little bit or fill up our own cup a little bit, so that we're more able to be present for other people, so that we're more able to be compassionate and kind to other people. It's not instead being kind to yourself instead of others. It's purely from the standpoint of saying, if I look after myself, if I find a way of prioritizing my mental health right now, then I will be more able to be present for the people in my life that rely on me. So by putting meeting with self, my meeting with self is sometimes just 15 minutes. Sometimes it's half an hour. Sometimes it's an hour. In fact, it's not unknown for me to watch an episode of Star Trek during the day when I'm busy. Whatever floats your boat. I happen to be a Trekkie, but by doing that in the middle of a busy day, what I'm actually doing is I'm elevating the need to protect my own mental health. By putting it in my diary, I'm saying I value my mental health and I'm willing to do what it takes to look after myself, because I know it's important to do. So there's a heap of things, ways that you can practice self-kindness. It doesn't have to be a lavish treats or spending spree on yourself. It could simply be saying no, or getting better at saying no. It doesn't have to be a hard no. It could be a soft no, maybe later, or maybe perhaps, is there another way that I could help you with that doesn't require the same time investment, sort of thing. There's lots of ways that you can practice saying no, or maybe not yet, or in some other way that doesn't involve overstretching yourself. Setting boundaries is another kind of way. Asking for help if you need help is another way of practicing self-kindness. So I just wanted to talk a wee bit about self-kindness, because it's so very, very important that we remember to also look after ourselves. And before we move to questions, I just wanted to finish with talking about one of my favorite effects of kindness. And it's the fact that kindness is highly contagious. In fact, I've written 12 books and I've researched a lot of stuff over the years. And one of the most contagious phenomena I have ever come across is kindness. In fact, kindness has an R number somewhere between 3 and 5. I say somewhere between because it depends. It depends on where you are, the context of your life, how many interactions you have, and a whole host of different things. So somewhere between 3 and 5. And remember, R number from COVID times refers to reproducibility rate. In other words, an R number less than 1 means that an infective agent is beginning to die out. Anything greater than 1 means it's contagious. So the R number of kindness is somewhere between 3 and 5. But what I love is researchers at Harvard and Yale measured the contagiousness of kindness out to what's called 3 social steps. Now, what that means, I'll use the R number of 5 to make the point. Right? So let's suppose you be kind to someone today, right? You offer some words of encouragement or support. You show compassion for someone. You listen to someone. You're present for someone. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It's everyday, ordinary little things that matter a heck of a lot, right? And then you get on with the rest of your day. What you don't see is what happens next. Because of how you made that person feel, if you happen to have turned around and followed that person around for the rest of the day, not that you would do that, but if you did, what you would learn is because of how you made that person feel, that person will now likely be kind or kinder to 5 people. Now, those 5 people that's the R number of 5, those 5 people are at 1 social step away from you. Now, if you happen to have a wee drone and you set that drone to track the behaviours and interactions of those 5 people, not that you would do that, but if you did, and you had this wee drone, you tracked his behaviour, what you would find is each of those 5 people would also likely, over the course of the next day or so, would likely be kind or kinder also to 5 people. And those now 25 people are at 2 social steps away from you. But now if you had a wee swarm of drones and you set them to track the movements and behaviours of those 25 people, not that you would do that, but if you did, and you had these wee drones flying around tracking all this stuff, then what you would also learn is each of those 25 people, because of how they now feel, having been on the receiving end of an act of kindness that started with you, will now likely, over the course of the next day or so, be kind or kinder to 5 people. And what you now have at 3 social steps away from you is 125 people receiving an act of kindness. Now, I say 125, give or take a wee bit. It's not statistically exact. We live in a real world, but more or less, that or thereabouts kind of ballpark. But what I'm saying is that's the bit that you don't see. And I put it to you that even on the days where you don't feel that you're making a difference, I put it to you that you really are creating ripple effects all over the place. You just don't notice it. Think of it this way. Imagine you happen to walk past a pond and just casually flick a little pebble into the pond and not even watch it dropping. You just happen to walk on and go to your work or go to meet your friends, whatever you're doing. What you don't see is the pebble drops down, hits the pond, and it goes plop, and then it sets in motion a wee wave. And the wave begins to move out. And way over at the other side of the pond, a few minutes later, there's wee lily pads doing that. And they're waving up and down. Now, they don't know why they're doing that, but they're waving up and down because of the wave. Now, what set the wave in motion was a pebble that you casually flicked into the pond, not even noticed, and then got on with the rest of your day. Now, the pebble is a metaphor for an act of kindness that you do, and then you walk away and get on with the rest of your day. What you don't see is the wave, and the wave is the ripple effect of kindness. And the lily pads is a metaphor for what's rising and falling in real life. It's people's smiles. It's people's happiness. It's the quality of people's days. And I put it to you that you're doing this every single day. And I'm saying this because I know from experience that many of us have these times, and you might be having these times right now, where we wonder if we're really worthwhile. And I've had this myself. You wonder if you're worthwhile, or what's the point of me? I struggled with depression several years ago, so I know what that's like. And we wonder, am I having any impact on people at all in the way I lead my life, what I do? And I'm telling you, every single day, what you don't see is the ripple effect of all these little displays of compassion and kindness that you show, because you just do these things because you're a nice person. And then you go on with the rest of your day. But there's always a ripple effect. And I'm trying to assure you that you really make a massive difference on people's lives every single day. You just don't notice that you're doing it. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to share. I packed a heck of a lot into that short space of time. So I'm happy to take questions. And Rachel, I think, will come back on and just field any questions out to me. I hope this was useful for you.
Thank you, David. That was amazing. Really fascinating.
Thank you.
So we've got anti-aging, anti-inflammatory, contagious, like so many reasons to get involved with more kindness. Thank you so much. Really encouraging. So you did mention about, you kind of gave us an example of maybe setting time aside for yourself, which I think is really important, isn't it? Because it's very easy to kind of think, okay, kindness, and just put all the focus onto other people. But as you said, it is really important for us to sort of fill our own tank as well before we kind of give it away. So we did have a question on how specifically you put these findings into your daily life, which obviously you touched on, but I just wondered if you had any other kind of examples, or maybe if you have a favorite kindfulness practice, I love that term, that you can share.
Well, actually, there's a really good kindfulness practice that also helps us to practice self-kindness, and it's a Tibetan book. It's one of my favorite. I do it nearly almost every day, and it's called Metta. Or so if people want to Google it, Metta, METTA. And in the West, we refer to it as the loving kindness meditation. And basically, you think of different, it comes under the umbrella term of a kindfulness practice, because most of the focus is thinking compassionately and kindly. And basically, you think of different people in your life. And for each person, you say something like, and I say something like because there's different versions, but they're more or less the same sentiment. Something like, may you be happy and well and safe, and may you feel at ease. And for each person in your life, you say that 3 times. But here's a very important part of it. You also include yourself, and you start with yourself from the perspective that you also have to fill up your own cup. So we start the meditation with ourselves. May I, and I often put my hands on my heart when I do it, and I say, may I be happy and well and safe, and may I feel at ease. May I be happy and well and safe, and may I feel at ease. May I be happy and well and safe, and may I feel at ease. And then you begin to extend that circle of compassion to other people. So you choose people that you care about in your life, people important to you in your life, and you wish the same for them. Think of each person in turn. May you be happy and well and safe, and may you feel at ease, 3 times for each person. And then you can extend it even further, and you can start to wish the same sentiment, same compassionate and kind sentiment for people that you don't know all that well. people you just see around, maybe, who maybe serve you in a shop or pass you in the street, people you see, but you don't really know. And for each of those people, may you be happy and well and safe, and may you feel at ease. And then you extend this circle of compassion a little bit further still onto people that you find difficult or challenging. And again, for each of these people, in turn, may you be happy and well and safe. May you feel at ease. And then we extend it all the way out to encompass all life. So may all living beings far and wide be happy and well and safe, and may they feel at ease. Again, 3 times. And you can make that practice 5 minutes or 20 minutes. It depends on how many people you apply it to. But the point is, you start with self-compassion and in a kind intention, and then you extend that compassion onto kind intention onto other people. And it's a wonderful kindfulness practice that serves the role of benefiting our own mental health, because it's self-care, but also deepening your compassion and kindness for other people. And research shows it does cause physical changes in the brain. It brings about also an anti-inflammatory effect inside the body as well. Research studies has actually shown that it reduces the inflammatory response to stress, that exact kindfulness practice.
Wow. And is that something that you can do? Like, do you have to kind of sit there for 20 minutes and do it, or can you adjust?
Anywhere, you can sit. Literally, I know this sounds a bit odd, but I make it because I want to bring this home to the human level. You can literally be in the shower, you can be sitting on the pan. Literally, I want to make this as human as possible, as real life as possible. You can be anywhere, except obviously driving or operating heavy machinery, typically for meditation, but you can be anywhere doing anything. You could be sitting on the bus, on the train, you could be on a plane. You can take like 2 minutes and just say, may I be happy and well and safe, may I feel at ease. Then a few other people, you could be out walking in the park or walking down the street. I do a walking version. Walking in the street. I learned this from a lovely teacher called Sharon Salzberg. I went to one of her events once, and Sharon got us out into the park, and we walked, and she said, just look at people, just catch people, see people, and just silently wish, may you be happy and well and safe, and may you feel at ease, and just literally walk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever length, and just send thoughts of compassion and kindness to everyone or certain types of people that you see. Yeah.
Brilliant. So you can really just bring it into your life. Yeah, I have actually found that public transport is quite a good place to do that practice, because where you normally might just kind of be on your phone, or maybe if it's really packed, you might be a bit like aggravated, but actually that kind of helps to soften, and you've got those people around you to kind of bring to mind.
Absolutely.
Lovely. Thank you. And we did have another question on if people have certain difficult relationships, maybe where it might be more difficult to access kindness and compassion. The question was, can you still experience the benefits of being kind when you just kind of focus, I guess, on people that you do like?
Yeah. So there's a couple there's a few different ways to approach something, and it depends on the situation, because we're not all in the same. We don't always have the same context of lives. We have people are in different types of situations in their lives. And what I try to do is reach for the thought that you never know what someone is dealing with or has dealt with in their life to this point, that's causing them to behave in the way they're behaving right now. Now, it might not change the situation right away, but what it might do, if you can find that thought, is it might change how you feel about it. And it might change how you respond. Because rather than coming from a reactive space because you're feeling hurt or offended, you're coming from an empowered space because you've reached for that thought. You never know what's gone on in a person's life in the past that's brought them to this point, or what they're dealing with privately right now that's causing them to behave or present in the way they are. So because you've reached for that thought, it might not change the person, but it'll change how you feel, and it'll change how you respond, and you'll be able to respond from a much more powerful space. Now, what that might allow you to then do is say or do something that you might not have said or done before in a much more present, empowered space. Now, that doesn't always work, because sometimes there's times when it's not, when it's harder to find that thought. And because maybe it's been going on too long, for example, or you've been in a really heavy situation. And these are the times where we have to turn it around and turn the compassion towards ourselves and say, maybe I have to leave the room. Whatever the room means, it could mean this job or this physical room, or it could mean leaving the room, the relationship, for example. It can mean a number of different things for different people. But personally, I always try to, if I can, and I don't always find it, because it's not, I even write about compassion and kindness. It doesn't mean that I'm brilliant at it. I'm just human, and we're all on our own journey doing the best we can. And sometimes I can't find that thought, but I try my best. And I'm saying this because if you can't find that thought of, you never know what a person's dealing with, don't give yourself a hard time, because you're only human. And you've got to understand that you've also been through a lot in your life that's brought you to this particular place in your life that makes it more difficult, for example, to find that thought. But I try to go there first. And it as I say, it doesn't change. It sometimes does change the situation in a remarkably, magical way sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. But it certainly changes how you feel and how you respond. Much more empowered space. And as I say, if you can't find that thought, then maybe it has to go, the compassion has to turn inwards and acknowledge the fact that maybe I just have to find a way of leaving this room, or something in between. So I hope that's useful.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very good point, just to kind of help us to change. Because I think sometimes we can be very narrowly focused with, as you said, some relationships, they really are very difficult, but often I think we do have the blinders up and are very kind of narrowly focused, and just that question can kind of help to expand our perception and just invite in the truth that actually, those people just like us, are dealing with a number of challenges, or have been through a number of things. So that's really helpful, I think, to kind of bring out in those moments where it is tough, but equally just being present to, okay, if it is difficult for me, maybe I just need to give myself a moment instead of forcing myself, guilt tripping myself into being kind. That's not necessarily helpful.
Exactly, Rachel. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Could go on for a while talking about this kindness stuff. Thank you, David. But we are at time. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to just let people know about your latest book before we close.
My latest, that's my latest book. It's the first book that I've ever had a sweary word on the front cover, but it's in a compassionate context. It's a totally different context. What I'm actually saying is we should care about each other. We literally should, and it's very healthy. It's good for your mental, physical health. So it just came out in July 2024. It's all the different mental and physical health benefits of kindness, how to be kind to yourself, how to be a kind leader if you're in business or politics, if you're just if you work in an organization. There's a chapter on how to lead with kindness, how to practice self-kindness. I've even got kind lines. So it's a word I invented. You're allowed to invent a word if you write books. And kind guidelines. So guidelines based on kindness for living life in a very healthy way, from a standpoint of behaving compassionately and kindly as you lead your life. So got a whole heap of different stuff in the book.
Wonderful. Lovely. That actually just sparked a little question that I had briefly, was just, do you have any kind of they don't have to be wild and crazy, but just any ideas of, like, having done all this research, of what we could do, like, that would sort of help to create the habit of kindness on a kind of societal or systemic level?
Yeah, I think, first of all, one of the reasons why I write so much science about kindness is because it helps people to realize that we're supposed to be kind. And it also helps, it's a good talking point, because who knew that kindness was neurologically and physiologically the opposite of stress? Who knew that kindness produces impacts in your blood, in immune cells? Who knew that kindness produces an anti-inflammatory effect, impacts genetics, impacts the aging process? And what that does is it elevates dialogues about kindness and compassion up to another level. And I think when we start to realize it, we realize that it's actually very healthy for us to be kind. It's better to be kind than not, actually, for each of us individually, but for society as a whole. So I make lots and lots of videos, and I write on this and I speak about it because I'm trying to elevate kindness up to the same level as we talk about diet and exercise as an intervention. Diet and exercise, managing our stress. Let's be kind, because we're supposed to be kind. And this is actually a solution to many of the problems, I think, that we face in the world, because our default mode sometimes goes towards stress, or it goes towards reaction. And actually, compassion and kindness would be a wonderful place to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think just having that, like you said, the awareness of the impact on it, you know, when you were talking, I was just like, we've really got our priorities like mixed up here. Like this is, it's powerful, really important stuff.
Really.
Lovely. Oh, well, any final words before I wrap?
Just be kind. And to reiterate what I said in response to that really lovely question is be kind best you can, because you never know what people are dealing with behind closed doors. And I mean that not just in the context of that question, but I mean that in life in general. Just be kind, because you never know what people are dealing with behind closed doors. And I think if we try to live by that type of principle, then knowing what to do in a variety of situations becomes a little bit easier.
And it's win-win-win. It sounds
absolutely.
like.
It's 100%. Yeah.
Why not?
100%. Yeah.
Lovely. Oh, well, thank you so much, David, for coming, and for every one of you for attending and your wonderful questions and comments. So we at the GCC do events more or less every week. So do check out our events page if you'd like to join our next event. And also, just to let you know, we just launched our first free course in compassion called 7 Steps to Compassionate Living. So if you're not already in that course, then please join. It's free. So we'd love to have you join. It started yesterday, but you know, it's an evergreen course, so you can hop on whenever. And I think that is it. Oh, and also, if you're not already a member of the GCC, please join. So I think we'll leave it for now, but thank you so much, David, again. And
my pleasure, Rachel. Everyone. It's been really great. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. I really, truly hope that this has been interesting and helpful in some kind of way. And just be kind. It's almost always the right thing to do.
Lovely. All right. Well, take care, everyone.